Hey, I'm Jeff, and today I'm going to show you how I set up an electric fencer to keep squirrels off my bird feeders. I'm going to go through what I used to do for keeping squirrels off, then how I set up this electric fencer, and finally show some videos of it in action. Before I get started on how I keep the squirrels off the feeders, first I want to point out that I actually like squirrels. I'm not doing this just to punish the squirrels. I actually enjoy squirrels. They're very smart creatures that can solve some amazing puzzles, as you'll see in some of the videos here later. They are cute, furry little things. They're fun to watch. And I even feed them. I pick up corn in fields and just have a simple feeder I keep stocked here and there. And I also don't mind when they're cleaning up feed on the ground. So anything the birds spill on the ground is fair game for them to finish cleaning up after. I just don't want them on the feeder primarily eating the bird seed. So my main goal is just trying to keep the feed and the feeders and the squirrels happy in their own spot, not on the feeder. I originally started with just a basic feeder, not like this one, but just a basic bird feeder. And of course the squirrels got to it right away. So I got a different squirrel-proof one, not this one. And it worked really well at keeping the squirrels off, but it was actually so good at keeping the squirrels off, it didn't have good access ports for the birds to eat, so I wasn't feeding the birds either. So I ended up getting this feeder, and this one works really well. When you press down on it, it just locks the holes closed on the side. And it's very effective, but if a squirrel really wants to, it will jump from the ledge or jump onto here, shake this feeder, and knock some food on the ground, then they go to the ground and eat it. So I needed to stop them from doing that. Also, I wanted to feed suet, and the robins and the woodpeckers seem to like suet quite a bit, and I couldn't keep the squirrels off of this, or at least when I built a cage around this to prevent the squirrels from getting to it, it also stopped the birds from getting to it. So once again, I wasn't successfully feeding the birds while keeping the squirrels off. This led me to a grill igniter. So I picked up a used grill igniter and wired it up to my previous suet feeder with a cage around it. So the squirrels would rest on a platform that was the ground, and the suet cage was actually hot. So if a squirrel was on there, I could go up and I could click the thing and it would shock them. They were quite startled. They jumped off the thing and they were, they kind of stayed away. But squirrels are quite smart, and they quickly learned not to stay off of it, but to look to see if I was there to make sure I wouldn't hit the button before they would eat from the feeder. So it was not successful. I needed a continuous method of keeping the squirrels off, which takes me to the electric fencer. So let me walk you through how I have this set up. This is a basic electric fencer previously used for horses, just a small one for a few miles of fence. I've got that set up here, and I just connected an old piece of extension cord, and I've connected the hot and ground from here to run over to the bird feeder. So the wire comes up right here, and I've got the ground connected to this piece of metal on top of the deck railing, same on each side. This is the ground. It also loops up here and goes around the top, kind of like the feed dish on the feeder, where a bird or a squirrel will be reaching in to grab the food. I then have the hot connected to this piece of wire here, and the squirrel will complete the circuit if they sit both on this and touch here, or if they happen to be on the fence and reach over and touch this rail as they're trying to climb on. This works great because this spot is big enough that a bird sits here and can eat just fine. Birds never get shocked by this system. Even mourning doves, they sit here all the time and they never get shocked by the fencer. But a squirrel, if it sits here, it reaches over and it's going to get hit by this and startled and knocked off the fencer. But usually they don't even get that far, and they're stopped when they're here reaching over to get on the feeder. Walking through it a little bit more, the ground is connected to the post that goes into the ground and attached to the pole that goes up to the feeders. So essentially the entire pole is grounded, and the hot wire goes across here and runs next to the pole and then loops over and out to the feeder. So if a squirrel tries to climb the pole, they'll touch the pole and the electric fence wire and get shocked and startled and run away. Same if they work over here. This kind of extra little piece keeps them from climbing down and around, makes sure they can't escape it. And later, to protect the suet feeder, I took this simple piece of wire here, connected it just using electrical tape, created a few extra little loops here, and that's enough that if the squirrel tries to climb over this, they will complete the circuit as well. For insulators, you can see I'm using the old horse fence insulators on the pole, but for the little wire I have here, I'm just using electrical tape to keep it away and also attach it to the post. That's worked just well enough. Similarly over here, I don't even have an insulator on the hot. I'm just using some Gorilla tape and having it on the wood. I know I'm losing some voltage, but I'm just trying to knock a squirrel off. I'm not trying to go through thicker skin like on a larger farm animal, so I don't need to worry about any voltage loss here. But before I show you a few videos on how it actually performs against squirrels, I want to show you a diagram about how it's wired, why it works, and why it's only going to train the squirrel and not actually injure the squirrel. On the fencer, there were two terminals, the ground and the fence. So the ground passes over the fence railing and connects to the bird feeder pole and ultimately to the ground. And as it sounds, it is grounded and it is at a reference of 0 volts. The fence side is the positive side, and anything that would connect between the positive and negative is going to experience a flow of energy through it and what would be experienced as a shock. You should always avoid getting shocked by anything, just due to it's always unsafe, but an electric fencer is relatively safe when it comes to getting a shock. If you think about household currents or a down utility line or something like that, it's going to have a lot of energy in a sine wave that is continuous. And it actually puts out so much energy that there's this amperage that could flow through your body that's actually called the let go threshold. So if you were to grab onto a down power line, it would have so much energy, you would get stuck to it and it would pinch your muscles against that conductor to the point where you can't let go, and the result is the end for you. In contrast, the electric fencer doesn't put out a continuous amount of energy. It just does it in short pulses. It pulses, and then about a second later, it pulses again with a high voltage that results in a fairly low amps flowing through you because you have a somewhat high resistance. And that's a much longer discussion to get through. But the end result is you get a shock, you get an encouragement not to touch it, but it pauses and lets you let go so you can move away from it. The experience of touching this, it feels somewhere between like a mosquito bite and a bee sting. Depends on your pain threshold, and we all kind of experience things like this differently. If I walked outside right now and touched it, I most likely would be just fine. I didn't think this video would be complete unless I subject myself to a shock from this fencer just like a squirrel. I'm not looking forward to it. I've been shocked by electric fencers before, and I know what they feel like. They're not fun. It's not something you want to do every day. And that is precisely the point. The squirrel also is going to learn that they don't want to touch it and they're not going to come back. Yet at the same time, they're not going to get hurt when actually first touching it and training themselves on the fence. So here we go. Not that fun, not that bad. Let's do this again. Alright, it's not that fun. Don't recommend it, but I'm fine. I'm ready to watch some videos of the squirrels trying out this electric fencer next. So here's our first contestant on the Squirrel versus Engineer show. We're both playing to see who gets to keep the sunflower seeds, and Engineer wins on that first one. Later that same day, the squirrel tries again, tries the exact same spot, and once again is rejected. The following day, the squirrel comes in, and this is interesting. They are pretty smart, and they keep trying something new, and this squirrel managed to find a way onto the feeder without actually touching the ground. So he was fine, and he sat up there and was, I think, quite proud of it. He even jumps over and shows off at how good he did. But eventually he gets hungry and heads back to the feeder, probably a little more bold this time. And this time he makes the mistake of touching the hut and the ground, and another win for the engineer. Squirrel comes back. I guess the one side of the feeder didn't work so well. So now he's going to try the other side of the feeder and see how that goes, see if the same problem's there, and he quickly finds that the engineer wins again. Squirrel comes back for the next round, and, well, same thing. Squirrel's coming over this time. I think he's just mad at me, and decides to just turn the camera back to the ground. And that night it was interesting. I had a new visitor. I never really knew there were mice raiding the bird feeders in the backyard at night, which led me to a different fix to that problem. So if you've enjoyed this video, subscribe, and you'll see a video about mouse traps in the coming
month or two. Here's the next squirrel, shows up. They're kind of getting to a point where they're not that interested anymore and just avoid it. Here's a squirrel, though, that tries and just relaxing up there, wakes up, tries the feeder, and is gone. Next up, we have a squirrel trying the other side of the feeder again. And watch this. I think he's going to make it on here. He's going to find a way to jump past it. Ultimately, I learned that I need to put chicken wire on top of the fence rail so I have a better ground and they can't avoid the ground when they're touching the feeder. But eventually, squirrel didn't win. On to the next squirrel. Trying something new. He looks around, he's tried the left side, tried the right side. This time he's going to get a little bit gymnastic and try a different approach. And really give him a lot of credit for this. He hops off the front and finds an actual way down onto the feeder. This just goes to show how smart squirrels are and how they'll just keep trying. Rarely have I seen the same squirrel ever try the same thing twice when he's been rejected. So here he's going, he's quite bold, and if you watch the timestamps, he's here for a long time, enjoying a lot of food. But eventually catches up with them, gets a little bold, and he touches the conductors, and down he goes. There's actually birds starting to show up at the feeder now, since the squirrels aren't constantly antagonizing him. This squirrel is doing what a lot of squirrels do now. They come, look at the feeder, they turn around and go home. They don't bother anymore. This squirrel, once again, trying something different, tries to see if he can get in the back. He makes a mistake, though, and his right foot touches both conductors on the side. And once again, another win for the engineer. Got a squirrel versus bird again here. Squirrel checks it out, makes the same mistake, off he goes. This is a unique squirrel. This is the bobtailed squirrel. It must have got injured or something in the neighborhood. It's been running around. It's kind of hilarious. It looks like a rabbit running across the street, and then it goes up the tree. But meets the same fate. And this is the only video I have of a squirrel trying the pole. And he gets a little shocked here, makes it down to the ground. And this is almost 4 months ago. And that is the last squirrel that's ever attempted to get at the feeder. They've learned their lesson. They never get shocked. And the bird feeder is back to looking like normal with normal happy birds visiting all the time. So with that, I hope you enjoyed this video. And it gives you a few ideas on how to deal with squirrels in your own backyard.
Isn't that great?